Francis was the kind of man who believed that peace in the home was worth more than gold. He had a quiet spirit, always smiling, always nodding, and always saying, "Yes, dear," even when it made no sense. People in the neighborhood of Jakande, Lekki, where they lived in a modest two-bedroom flat, used to call him Mr. Yesma. To outsiders, Francis was a devoted husband. But those who lived close enough, or stayed too long in their sitting room, knew the truth: Francis had no voice in his own home. His wife, Patricia, was the voice, the speaker, the microphone, and even the volume control. Francis. Francis. How many times will I tell you not to keep your smelly shoes near the door? Patricia shouted one Tuesday morning, just as neighbors were sweeping their compounds. "I'm sorry, dear," Francis said, quietly picking up his slippers. A neighbor, Mama Tolu, looked on from her veranda and shook her head. "The goat that follows the sheep to the market will also be priced like one," she muttered to herself. Patricia insulted Francis like it was a sport. She insulted him when he brought home the wrong groceries, insulted him when he came back late from work due to Lagos traffic, and even insulted him in church when he gave a testimony she didn't approve of. "You talk too much, Francis," she said once, dragging him out of the church service. "Must everybody know you once failed WAEC?" He was humiliated, but still smiled at her as if her words were sweet honey. Inside, Francis was dying slowly, like a plant with no sunlight. At work, he was respected. He was a quiet but brilliant accountant in a real estate firm at Victoria Island. His boss often said, "If everyone worked like Francis, I'd have fewer headaches." But at home, Francis became a different man, timid, uncertain, constantly walking on eggshells. He no longer had hobbies. The football matches he used to enjoy, gone. Patricia said football was a waste of time for men who didn't own a car. The guitar he used to play, sold it, after Patricia complained it was childish and attracted too much noise. One day, his friend Amaka came to visit. They'd been friends since secondary school, and Amaka now lived in Abuja. "Guy, you don't disappear." "Oh," Amaka said, sipping malt. "What happened to our usual Saturday hangouts?" Francis gave a weak laugh. "Oh, you know now, married life." "Married life doesn't mean prison." "No," Amaka replied, narrowing his eyes. "You're not the same, bro. Patricia, they use you shine." Before Francis could answer, Patricia barged into the parlor. "Francis, did you forget to soak the beans I told you about?" "Oh, sorry, dear. I'll do it now." "And what are you doing here talking like you don't have chores?" "Amaka, good evening," she added dryly. Amaka stood. "Good evening, Ma." As soon as Patricia left, Amaka leaned in. "Bro, your wife is pressing you like remote control. This is not marriage. This is drama." Francis laughed nervously again, but this time, the laugh was a little wet, his eyes betrayed a gloss of tears. Later that night, while Patricia slept, Francis sat by the window, staring at the moon. A man once full of dreams was now a shadow. He remembered how he had planned to open a bakery. Patricia said it was a waste of time. "Do you have flour in your brain?" she had mocked. He thought of his mother, who once said, "A man who lets himself be led by the nose will one day trip over his pride." How right she was. He didn't hate Patricia. At least, not in the way one hates a thief or a liar. But he feared her. He feared her words, her moods, her temper. And worst of all, he feared himself, his inability to say no, to fight back, to remember who he was before marriage. The next morning, Patricia threw his food at him because he forgot to iron her blouse. She hissed, "You're useless, Francis. Sometimes I wonder how I ended up with a man like you." Francis didn't eat. He picked up the spoon, then dropped it. He walked out of the house for the first time without saying anything. His steps were slow, but his heart was racing. Was something changing? Or was it just the wind? Francis didn't know where he was going, but he walked anyway, past the corner mosque, past the Accra woman who gave him a puzzled look, past the dusty bus stop where Agboros shouted as usual. His thoughts were louder than the horns and the downfall conductors screaming, CMS. CMS straight. He ended up in front of the Catholic church near Eleison. The compound was quiet, with just a few women sweeping and an old man trimming the hedges. He walked in, sat at the back pew, and placed his face in his palms. He didn't cry. Not yet. Are you all right, sir? A gentle voice asked. It was an old priest, white-haired, holding a broom. Francis nodded slowly. I just needed a quiet place. You are welcome here, the priest said, smiling. Sometimes, we only hear God when everything else is quiet. Francis nodded again, but inside, his chest was boiling with a strange heat he couldn't understand. Pain. Frustration. Weakness. And shame. Later that evening, he returned home to meet Patricia seated on the couch, watching Africa Magic. The entire flat reeked of burnt stew. Where have you been since morning? She barked as soon as he entered. I went to church. For what? You now join the choir, ABI. Look, Francis, I'm not in the mood for your nonsense. I asked you to fix the pipe in the bathroom. You didn't. So what did you do all day? Francis sat down. Quiet. Listen. I'm talking to you, she snapped. He looked at her with tired eyes. Not angry. Just tired. Patricia, do you love me? The question hit her like cold water. She frowned. What kind of stupid question is that? I just want to know, he repeated softly. She laughed, dry and mean. Love. You're asking about love. Francis, love won't pay ni per below. Stop talking like one of those jobless romantic fools. He stood and walked to the kitchen. The stew had burned beyond saving. He opened the fridge, nothing. No food. No water. The silence between them grew heavy, until Patricia hissed and returned to her show. Weeks passed, and Francis became even quieter. But something inside him had started shifting. He no longer flinched when she insulted him. He no longer tried to explain himself or beg for her approval. He just watched. One Sunday, after service, the pastor had preached on Head of the Home, quoting, Husbands, love your wives, but lead your homes with righteousness and strength. Patricia, as usual, had laughed it off. That sermon is for real men, she said. That night, as Francis lay on their hard mattress, staring at the ceiling, something snapped. Not in a violent way, but like a string that had been too tight for too long. He sat up. Patricia, from tomorrow, things will change. She laughed in the dark. Francis, go back to sleep, I beg. It's past 12 midnight. Dreams are flying. But he didn't sleep. The next morning, he didn't make her breakfast. He didn't iron her dress. He didn't remind her of her dentist appointment or run after her slippers like usual. When she shouted his name, he didn't answer. When she came to the kitchen, face twisted in annoyance, he calmly said, I'm not your slave, Patricia. I'm your husband. She blinked. What did you just say? I said I am not your slave. And I will not be treated like one anymore. She stood in shock. Francis had never raised his voice, never talked back, never challenged her. But today, his tone was calm, and that scared her more. Have you joined cult? She asked. No. I just remembered I am a man. That day, he wore his best shirt to work. He greeted the receptionist with a broad smile. He spoke up in meetings. He even bought lunch for himself instead of waiting to take leftover food home. He felt alive. Meanwhile, Patricia was calling him non-stop. 5 missed calls. 7, 10. He ignored them. She began to panic. That evening, he came home and met her in the parlor, pacing like a lioness. "Where did you go after work?" "To buy my peace of mind," he answered, placing down a small bag of groceries. "Francis, don't start this madness. Are you cheating on me?" "No. But I'm no longer cheating on myself." She stared at him, confused. This wasn't the Francis she knew. Something had changed, and it terrified her. Francis didn't tell Patricia where he was going that morning. He walked the streets of Lagos aimlessly, until he found himself at the Mile 2 Park, sitting on a cement slab near a suyo stand. The sharp smell of meat and pepper reminded him of better days, of youth, laughter, and freedom. He sat there for hours, thinking, silent. When he got home later that night, Patricia didn't even ask where he had been. Instead, she hissed and muttered, "Next time you disappear, don't bother coming back." But things started changing the following week when Francis's younger sister, Amaka, arrived from the village. "Brother Francis," she said as she stepped down from the bus, carrying a big go bag. "Mama said I should come and stay with you until I find work." Francis welcomed her warmly. Patricia did not. From the first day, the tension was thick. Patricia treated Amaka like an unwanted guest. She made snide remarks about her clothes, about her accent, and even about the way she cleaned the house. But Amaka was not her brother. Amaka was fire. One morning, Patricia shouted, "Amaka, did you finish the Titus fish in the stew?" Amaka calmly turned around and replied, "Yes. I cooked the stew, cleaned the house, fetched water, and washed your clothes. I think I deserve at least a fish head." Patricia gasped. "You dare talk back to me in my husband's house?" Amaka smiled. "My brother's house, you mean? Not your father's compound." It was like thunder had struck. From that day, Patricia knew she had met her match. Things got worse. Patricia would insult Francis, and Amaka would jump in. "You're a man without backbone," Patricia screamed one evening. "Then why are you still here?" Amaka shot back. "You've been pressing him like remote control. Remote don't spoil now. What next?" Francis began to change. Slowly, but surely. He stopped saying "yes, dear" every 5 minutes. He started laughing more. He resumed watching football. Amaka encouraged him to buy back a guitar. She even helped him design a logo for the bakery he had always dreamed of. Patricia became increasingly frustrated. "I can't live in this house with that village rat," she said one morning, throwing a plate on the floor. Francis stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "Then leave." Patricia froze. "What did you say?" "You heard me," Francis said. "This is my house. I work for it. I've bent for years, trying to please you, and all I got was insults. I'm done." Patricia raged, insulted everyone from Amaka to their landlord, packed her clothes in anger, and slammed the door behind her. She left. And Francis breathed. The first thing he did was sit on the floor and cry. Not because he missed her, but because he felt like a weight had been lifted. Life moved on. Within months, his bakery, Francis Flame Bakes, was up and running in Suralia. Amaka got a job with a fashion outlet in Lekki. And Francis, for the first time in years, smiled freely. One day, during choir practice at church, he met Ngozi, a calm, cheerful woman with deep faith and a kind smile. They talked. They laughed. They grew close. She never insulted him. Never mocked his dreams. She even encouraged him to sing during praise and worship, no matter how off-key. 2 years later, Francis married her. At their wedding, Amaka whispered to Francis, "Your new remote no dey press you oh. In fact, you be the one holding the remote now." Francis laughed. Not just with his mouth, but from his soul. He was finally free. Moral: a man who forgets his worth will be treated like sand beneath the feet. But when a man remembers who he is, even those who once pressed him like a remote will look for the battery and not find it.